In this video, we will learn 10 new words through short stories. It might seem like a small step, but in 100 days, you will easily learn 1,000 words, which is a big achievement. To help you learn better, please watch each video twice. At the end of the video, try to make your own sentences using the new words you've learned. Stay with us and let's explore today's new words. The tale of how I acquired courage. When I was a child, I often wondered how people acquire special skills. My older brother, Jack, could acquire anything he set his mind to. He acquired trophies for running, medals for swimming, and certificates for his grade. I thought, will I ever acquire anything like he does? One day, I saw a poster for a storytelling competition. The winner would acquire a golden pen, something I had dreamed of having. But there was a problem. I was afraid of speaking in front of people. I thought, how can I acquire courage to speak? I decided to ask Jack for advice. He said, to acquire courage, you must practice. Speak to the mirror, then to me, then to a group of friends. Little by little, you'll acquire the confidence you need. Following his advice, I practiced every day. I read stories aloud to my reflection. At first, I was nervous, but over time, I started to acquire a sense of ease. Then, I told my story to Jack, who clapped and said, "You're starting to acquire real skill." Finally, the competition day arrived. I stood on the stage, my hands shaking. But I remembered Jack's words, "To acquire courage, you must face your fears." I took a deep breath and began my story. As I spoke, I saw the audience smile and nod. I felt something new inside me, a strength I didn't know I had. By the time I finished, I realized I had acquired more than just courage. I had acquired a love for storytelling. When the winner was announced, it was me. I acquired the golden pen, but more importantly, I had acquired the belief that I could achieve anything if I worked hard. Now, when people ask me how to acquire something they dream of, I smile and say, start small, keep going, and one day, you'll acquire more than you ever imagined. The mystery I had to analyze. It all started with a strange note on my desk. The note read, "If you want to find the truth, analyze the clues." I didn't know who left it or why, but I was curious. What did it mean to analyze the clues? The first clue was a drawing of a clock. I thought, what should I do with this? Then I remembered. To analyze something means to look at it closely and understand it. So, I analyzed the clock. It showed 3 o'clock. Next, I found an envelope with the number 7 written on it. Again, I had to analyze. Was 7 a time? A date? I combined it with the clock. Could it mean 3 o'clock on the 7th day of the week? After analyzing the details, I realized it pointed to Sunday. I kept analyzing everything I found. A red ribbon tied to my chair made me think of my old red notebook. I analyzed its pages and found a message written inside. "Meet me at the park." At this point, I was excited. Analyzing each clue had brought me closer to the answer. I went to the park on Sunday at 3 o'clock. My best friend, Mia, was there, holding a box. "Why did you make me analyze all these clues?" I asked, laughing. She smiled and said, "I wanted to show you how fun it is to analyze. And here's your reward." She handed me the box. Inside was my favorite book, one I had lost months ago. Since that day, I've loved solving mysteries. Analyzing clues makes everything more interesting. Whether it's a puzzle, a problem, or even a story, I always remember, when you analyze, you discover the truth hidden in the details. And now I ask you, if you found a clue, how would you analyze it? The courage to approach. I remember the day clearly. It was my first time at the big city library, and I needed help. But there was a problem. I didn't know how to approach anyone. I stood near the information desk, holding my notebook. I saw a librarian organizing books. I thought, should I approach her now? But what if I said something wrong? I took a deep breath and tried to approach her. As I got closer, my heart raced. Suddenly I froze. Instead of talking, I pretended to look at a shelf. Why is it so hard to approach people? I wondered. After a few minutes, I saw a young boy confidently approach the librarian. He smiled and asked, "Can you help me find a book?" She nodded and showed him the way. I realized his approach was simple and friendly. Maybe I can try that too. Gathering my courage, I decided to approach the librarian again. This time, I walked slowly and said, "Excuse me, can you help me?" She smiled warmly and said, "Of course. How can I help you?" I explained that I needed books about history. She guided me to the right section, and I thanked her. It was such a small thing, but learning how to approach her made me feel proud. Since that day, I've tried to approach new situations with the same courage. When I started a new job, I approached my manager with questions instead of feeling scared. When I met new friends, I approached them with a smile. Now I understand. To approach means to go closer, closer to people, closer to problems, and closer to opportunities. And every time I approach something with courage, I discover something amazing. So, tell me, if you had a challenge, how would you approach it? The decision I had to consider. It was a cold evening when my teacher handed me an envelope. Inside was an invitation to a public speaking contest. "Consider joining," she said with a kind smile. At first, I didn't even want to consider it. I hated speaking in front of people. Why should I consider doing something that scares me so much? I thought. But that night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I decided to consider the reasons for saying yes. Winning could help me gain confidence. It could also impress my family and friends. But when I considered the reasons to say no, fear was at the top of the list. What if I forget my words? What if everyone laughs? The next day, I talked to my best friend, Mia. "Do you think I should consider competing?" I asked her. Mia said, "You should consider the bigger picture. Think about how much you'll grow if you try. Even if you don't win, you'll learn something new." Her words made me consider the idea more seriously. I wrote a list of pros and cons. Every time I considered the contest, I felt less afraid. Finally, I made my decision. I would compete. I spent weeks practicing. Every time I felt nervous, I would stop and consider why I was doing this. I reminded myself that it was about more than winning, it was about challenging myself. When the big day came, I stood on the stage and delivered my speech. To my surprise, I felt calm. I had considered every possible outcome, and I was ready. I didn't win the contest, but I won something even better, the belief that I could face my fears. Now, whenever I face a challenge, I stop and consider my options. And I always remind myself, the best decisions happen when we take time to consider everything. What about you? What will you consider doing next? Determined to determine the truth. One rainy afternoon, I found an old map in my grandfather's attic. The map had a note that said, "To find the treasure, you must determine the true path." The word determine caught my attention. I wondered, what does it mean to determine something? I asked my grandfather, and he said, "It means to figure something out by thinking carefully." Excited, I decided to determine the meaning of the clues on the map. The first clue was a drawing of a tree with 3 marks on it. I had to determine which tree in the garden matched the picture. After looking closely, I determined it was the big oak near the fence. Next, the map led me to the river. It said, "Determine the distance to the large rock." I measured each step carefully to determine exactly where to dig. By now I was tired, but I was determined to find the treasure. I told myself, if I don't determine every clue correctly, I'll miss the treasure. Finally, I reached the last clue. It read, "Determine if your heart is brave enough to dig." I smiled because I knew I was ready. I dug into the ground and found a small box. Inside was a letter that said, "The real treasure is the determination you showed to find this." At first, I laughed, but then I understood. My journey taught me how to determine solutions, how to stay focused, and how to never give up. Now, whenever I face a challenge, I remember that to determine the answer, I need to think, observe, and stay determined. And you? If you had a puzzle to solve, how would you determine the right answer? Developing my dream. When I was a child, I wanted to be a writer. But every time I started, I stopped. I didn't know how to develop my ideas into stories. My mother would say, "To develop something, you must work on it every day." One summer, I found an old notebook. Its pages were blank, waiting for me to fill them. I decided, this time, I will develop a story, no matter what. At first, it was hard. I had an idea about a boy who wanted to fly, but I didn't know how to develop the plot. I asked my teacher for help. She said, "To develop a story, you need characters, a setting, and a problem. Start small and let it grow." So, I worked every day. I developed the boy's personality. He was brave and curious. I developed the setting, a small village surrounded by mountains. Slowly, my story began to develop into something I was proud of. But one day, I hit a problem. The ending didn't feel right. I almost gave up. Then I remembered. To develop something takes time and effort. I asked my friend for advice, and she helped me develop a better ending. When I finished the story, I showed it to my family. My mother said, "You've developed a wonderful talent." My heart filled with joy because I had finally done it. Now, whenever I face a challenge, I remember how important it is to develop skills, ideas, and dreams. Whether it's learning a language, playing music, or writing a story, everything improves if you keep working on it. So, what about you? What dream do you want to develop? Start today and see how far you can go.
Enhancing the painting. One day my art teacher, Ms. Clara, looked at my painting. "It's good," she said, "but you can enhance it." I stared at the painting of a tree under the moonlight. I thought it looked fine. "What does enhance mean?" I asked. Miss Clara smiled. "Enhance means to make something better or more beautiful. Let's enhance this together." She pointed to the tree. "You can enhance the details. Add more leaves, darker shadows, and highlights on the bark." I carefully painted, and soon the tree looked more alive. Then she said, "Enhance the moonlight. Use white and soft blue to make it glow." I added more light, and the scene began to shine. But something was missing. Ms. Clara said, "Think about how you can enhance the feeling of the painting. Maybe add stars or a gentle breeze." I painted tiny stars and soft lines to show the wind. Painting felt magical now. "Enhancing is fun," I said, smiling. Later that day, I showed my painting to my parents. My father said, "Wow, you enhanced this so well. It looks amazing." I realized that enhancing is not just about paintings. You can enhance anything: your skills, your work, even your kindness to others. When you enhance something, you make it better than before. Now, I always ask myself, how can I enhance this? Whether it's a project, a hobby, or even a simple conversation, there's always a way to improve and add more value. And you? How will you enhance something in your life today? Remember, even small changes can enhance the big picture. Power to evaluate. One rainy evening, my teacher, Mr. Davis, gave us an unusual assignment. "Tomorrow," he said, "you must evaluate something important in your life. Bring your evaluation to class." I didn't know what evaluate meant, so I asked my mom. She said, "To evaluate means to think carefully about something and decide its value or importance." That night, I sat in my room wondering what to evaluate. Should I evaluate my favorite book? Or maybe my old guitar? Then I saw my messy desk. Papers, books, and pens were everywhere. Maybe I should evaluate my desk, I thought. I asked myself, is this desk helping me? Does it need to be cleaner? I started to evaluate each item. The broken pen? Useless. An old notebook? Useful. Little by little, I evaluated everything on my desk. When I finished, my desk was clean and organized. I smiled, realizing how helpful it was to evaluate things. The next day, I shared my experience with the class. Mr. Davis said, "Excellent. Evaluating helps us improve and make better decisions." Then he gave us another task. "Evaluate your goals," he said. I thought about my dream of becoming a writer. I evaluated my efforts. Am I writing enough? Could I practice more? From that day on, I started to evaluate everything: my studies, my habits, even my friendships. I learned that to evaluate means more than just thinking. It's about understanding what works, what doesn't, and how to improve. Now, I ask myself every day, have I evaluated my choices? Am I moving closer to my dreams? And you? When was the last time you stopped to evaluate something in your life? Remember, evaluating can guide you to make better decisions and reach your goals. Learning to implement. Last summer, my life changed. My teacher, Ms. Jane, told us, it's not enough to have ideas. You must implement them to see results. I didn't know what implement meant, so I asked her. She explained, to implement means to take action and put your plan into practice. I nodded, but I didn't understand fully until I tried to start my own garden. I had a great plan. I wanted to grow tomatoes, carrots, and flowers. I spent hours reading about gardening. I wrote down steps: prepare the soil, plant the seeds, water them daily. But for weeks I did nothing. I didn't implement my plan. One day my little brother said, "You talk a lot about your garden, but where are the plants?" His words hit me. I realized my plan meant nothing if I didn't implement it. The next morning I woke up early and started. I implemented step 1, preparing the soil. I removed rocks and added compost. Then I implemented step 2, planting seeds. Each seed went into the soil carefully. Every day I implemented step 3, watering the plants. First I saw nothing, but I didn't stop. Slowly, tiny green shoots appeared. My plan was working because I had implemented it. When the first tomato grew, I ran to show Ms. Jane. She smiled. See? When you implement a plan, you create something real. Now I use this lesson in everything I do. Whether it's learning English, doing homework, or achieving a big dream, I know that planning is just the first step. The real magic happens when you implement the plan. And you? Do you have ideas waiting to come to life? It's time to implement them. Take action today and watch what you can create. The simulation. It all began with a challenge from my science teacher, Mr. Carter. Next week, he said, you will experience a simulation of life on Mars. It will test your skills and creativity. I had no idea what simulation meant, so I stayed after class to ask. Mr. Carter explained, a simulation is like pretending. It's a way to practice or test something in a controlled environment that feels real. Excited, I couldn't stop thinking about the simulation. What would life on Mars feel like? How would we survive? On the big day, we entered a small room that looked like a spaceship. Mr. Carter said, this simulation will teach you how astronauts prepare for real missions. Follow the instructions carefully. The simulation began with an emergency. Our oxygen supply was low. My team had to find a way to fix it. Although it wasn't real, the simulation felt intense. I realized the purpose of the simulation was to help us learn problem solving without any real danger. Next, we faced a sandstorm. In the simulation, we had to protect our crops from the dust. It was hard work, but every challenge in the simulation taught us something new. By the end of the day, I was exhausted but happy. The simulation had shown me what it takes to survive in space: teamwork, quick thinking, and determination. As we left, Mr. Carter said, remember, a simulation is a safe way to practice for real-life situations. It helps us prepare for what's ahead. Now, I think about simulations differently. Whether it's a space simulation, a driving simulation, or even practicing English conversations, simulations let us practice and improve in a safe way. And you? What kind of simulation would you like to try? Remember, every simulation brings you closer to mastering a skill.